Hello and welcome to Press TV News Analysis. I'm Kavita Wai. 24-year-old Bradley Manning, the U.S. Army intelligence analyst accused of the largest leak of classified U.S. documents in history to whistleblower website WikiLeaks, deferred his plea on all charges against him at his hearing. In this news analysis, we will examine the contributions that his leak has made in revealing conduct of the U.S. military and then further examine if the U.S. has turned into a police state.
American Private First Class Bradley Manning walks out of courtroom in Maryland where he's been charged with leaking classified information to whistleblower website WikiLeaks. Manning is accused of downloading more than 700,000 classified or confidential files from a military network while serving in Iraq. It's been dubbed the biggest leak of classified information in American history. At his hearing, Manning declined to enter a plea to all charges against him, including aiding the enemy. The prosecutors have described him a trained and trusted intelligence analyst who knowingly committed criminal acts when he allegedly passed the documents to WikiLeaks. The charge of aiding the enemy could carry the death penalty under the U.S. military law, but the word is that the prosecutors will call for life imprisonment for him. The next court session is scheduled for March 15th and 16th. No date has yet been set for trial. The leaks divulge what's been called heinous crimes the American troops have committed against the Afghan and Iraqi people during the wars on those two nations under the pretext of fighting terrorism.
Light them all up.
202 traffic, 260.
Come on, fire. Hey, Roger. Keep shoot.
Bushmaster 7, Roger. This is Bushmaster 7, Roger. Engage.
1-8, engage. Clear. Come on. Clear. Clear. Warren, you should go. Oh yeah, look at that, right through the windshield.
The U.S. government has come under fire for what's been described as the mistreatment of Manning in custody.
Bradley Manning was held in solitary confinement for a year. He's been held for 18 months without any kind of hearing. I think he's been punished more than enough for doing the right thing already. And so I think it's time to end these charges, dismiss this case, and recognize that President Obama has polluted the environment for this trial so that justice can't be done in the military court system.
Many people in America, including observers, believe Manning's work should have been hailed as heroic since it saved lives and exposed the true face of the U.S. wars abroad. They also say Manning should be called a champion, not a traitor, because he has served democracy and the freedom of speech.
Let's find out what our guests think. Let me introduce them. Former U.S. Senate candidate Mark Dankof joins us from San Antonio, Texas. We have former Pentagon official Michael Maloof, who joins us from Washington. And West Coast coordinator from the International Action Center, John Parker, joins us from Los Angeles. Gentlemen, welcome. Mark Dankof, Bradley Manning helping bring to light illegal U.S. actions resulting in deaths, which included killings, abuses, and torture. Is he a traitor or a hero?
Basically, in many respects, I think he's a hero. The thing that is fascinating to me is that one thing that the Manning case reveals, which is never discussed, it seems, in the news media left, right, or center, and that is that he had an extremely troubled personal history, and a personal history that really would have disqualified him at a previous age from being a member of the American intelligence community. And I think it reveals a rather comedic act in the United States Army and, frankly, in the U.S. Army intelligence community that this guy ever got to first base in terms of the jobs that he ended up holding. After all, this is a fellow who came from a broken home, who was a practicing homosexual, who had a series of troubled relationships, interpersonal relationships that included threatening his father's second wife with a knife, and punching a female Army soldier in the face at one point during his career. He was disciplined at Fort Huachuca, Arizona, for posting some things on YouTube that were deemed to be sensitive information before he was ever transferred to Iraq to be a part of the intelligence community there. So looking at his personal history, even in something like WikiLeaks, shows that in the Manning case, we have to ask ourselves how many other people more stable or less stable than Manning, and who are currently serving in the American intelligence community, might be prepared for one reason or another, ideological or otherwise, to engage in similar leaking. This must have Washington absolutely concerned based upon the types of things that they're trying to cover up, including their collusion with Israel and trying to get a war started with Iran.
Mark Dankof, I don't quite follow the character assessment based on some of the things that Manning, you have revealed in his history, ties into what we're trying to open up here in terms of what Manning has done. How do the two relate?
Well, let me put it this way. My father was a full colonel in the United States Air Force Intelligence, the Air Force Technical Applications Center, during the height of the Cold War. That was the agency that was running the U-2 spy program for the Central Intelligence Agency and the Atomic Energy Commission at the height of the Cold War, and was directly responsible for, among other things, taking the photographs of these Soviet missile sites in Cuba in October of 1962. In those days, American intelligence used to look very closely at people's backgrounds who went into the intelligence community to assess whether or not there were things in their personal history that suggested they were less than stable, that suggested they were less than reliable, that suggested they had problems with authority one way or the other, and might be, based upon psychosocial profile, someone who would be particularly given to exposing classified information. All I'm suggesting is that Manning fits a profile that in a particular previous generations in the American intelligence community would have never had him in the position that he was in to begin with.
Okay, that's a good explanation for that. Let me bring you in, Michael Maloof. How would you assess, because this is something that has been highlighted, assess the conditions of his detainment? He has been in pretrial confinement since May 2010, including a military jail in Kuwait, under conditions that, well, they've said constitutes cruel and inhumane treatment, and by some standards, even torture, which included 23 hours a day in solitary confinement.
Well, the treatment is considered to be rather harsh, I think, because we're, under the United States Constitution, people are entitled to a speedy trial. I think the length of time that he's been in there, I think there's been prejudice and resentment that has been built up internally, and that's always expressed by internally by other officials that have him out of sight, out of mind, and take advantage of him. The reality is that the leaks were in the classified domain. However, what was leaked it has to be questioned as to whether it really constituted a risk to national security, whether it really was a threat to national security, given the type of information that he released. And oftentimes, information is classified for the purpose of hiding embarrassment, statements that might prove to be embarrassing if they got out. And unfortunately, that's an abuse of the classification system. And it's unlike the information that was released is unlike what happened during the Ames case or the Walker case during the height of the Cold War, which were very damaging to U.S. national security because it really did give away sources and methods. Those kinds of things are different than the expressions of one individual toward the leadership of another and put into a classified system. I think the United States was very embarrassed by what was revealed. It did not really. There may have been some question of some people who were informants. I think those names were generally taken out. But overall, the tenor of what was released was more of an embarrassment of what our policies in the Middle East have been, and it shows that our policies in the Middle East are basically corrupt, are basically bankrupt, if you will, because and given some of the comments that were made of other officials, of leaders of other countries, having that out and exposed is what really created the embarrassment. It wasn't any damage per se to national security.
Right. And
now, in light of that, what they've done internally now is tighten up internally to ensure that that kind of that people have more of a need to know. Now, his information was more at what we call collateral level, at the secret level. It wasn't at the top secret code word levels. But as the previous gentleman pointed out, given his clearance level, he probably was just at a certain area that he probably would never have been allowed to be cleared for even higher, more sensitive information.
Well, some have termed it, as you said, abuse of classified information. John Parker, let's listen to what Julian Assange has said. I'm going to quote him, that fomenting a worldwide movement of mass leaking is the most cost-effective political intervention. That's how he termed it. Hadn't it been past due that an intervention of what the U.S. has preached versus the realities, that it was a time due for that to happen? And, of course, the example that's been famous now is that Apache helicopter video that we just also saw in that report in Iraq, which civilians were killed, including the 2 Reuters cameramen.
Yes, it's almost a race against time to try and stop these wars, these U.S.-inspired wars or proxy wars that are having such a toll on innocent people all around the world. And so with that considered, Bradley Manning, whatever alleged crimes that Bradley Manning did, if these are true, then he should be considered a hero. And it should actually be the United States government that should be standing trial. I mean, the Nuremberg trials, when the Nuremberg trials occurred against the Nazis, and they established certain international rules. And those rules said that even a soldier is liable if he's doing a war crime, even if he's just following orders from a superior. So what does that say about the top brass in the United States? What does that say about the politicians who push these wars, and even the president who pushes these wars with drones, whether they're for drones or troops or special forces on the ground? These are illegal unilateral wars against innocent people, and they are war crimes. So Bradley Manning was just doing what he was obligated to do according to Nuremberg.
Okay.
Allegedly.
Well, John Parker, you posed a question that I'd like to throw to Mark Dankof in terms of what does this say about the generals all the way down to the soldiers, because we have multiple, numerous citations of the Geneva Convention, for example, being violated.
I agree with the comments made by both of the other guests, and I think it's indicative. It is a damning indictment, as it were, of the United States government from top to bottom. Whether you're talking about the criminal actions of chief executives, or you're talking about people in the relevant House and Senate committees that should have been involved in investigating some of these matters who have maintained their silence, or you're talking about an American Justice Department that not only has failed to follow up on some of these very serious and credible allegations of war crimes, but conversely is also arguing that the President of the United States has the right to order the assassination of American citizens for deeming, if he deems them to be terrorists or if he deems them to be supportive of terrorist activities, without a single thing being proven in a court of law and with the complete suspension of habeas corpus. So it's a damning indictment, and it's a particularly chilling thing that I think corresponds to something that John Huntsman said recently when he withdrew from the Republican presidential race, and that is that the United States is not simply in an economic deficit. We are in a trust deficit for some very good reasons. We don't trust the President of the United States, either Republican or Democrat. We don't trust a Congress that is increasingly controlled by the Israeli lobby and other special interests that are not operating with the interest of the average American citizen in mind. And we don't trust an American news media that, as Paul Craig Roberts has pointed out, is bought and paid for by these corporate interests, these banking interests, the Israeli lobby, the defense contractors, and all the rest of it. So in a sense, Manning, you could argue, has essentially been forced to do something that under more normal circumstances should have been disapproved of, simply because there has been a complete breakdown in due process of law from the President of the United States all the way down.
I believe Mark Dankof, you talked about the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, in your statements there. And Mark Maloof, that it has been stated, and this has caused quite an uproar in the United States, that this was basically the final nail in the coffin of democracy in the United States. I mean, what has brought about this act to be approved by President Obama? How did it come down to this? Some are saying, well, the United States has brought the war against terrorism in the home front.
Well, unfortunately, previous guest is correct that the president basically has a license to kill, even U.S. citizens, and without due process. This is extraordinary. It's something that needs to be condemned, needs to be brought out, but it's something that's basically overlooked in the United States, and even by the lawmakers who are too preoccupied with trying to get reelected. The reality is that crimes such as you exhibited in the video, there was nothing classified about that. Yet Manning is going to be crucified for having released that because it was classified, but classified against whom? So that who couldn't see it? So that the American people couldn't see it? It was very clear that it was like shooting fish in a barrel, and that you had people doing actions and activities which were in which there was no clear threat recognized, and if that's being classified, what's the only threat to national security is the embarrassment that you have troops that have gone hog wild and are out of control. There is no more discipline as a consequence, and so. This is a further extension of what the president's now doing, I think, in being allowed to order executions of Americans who, just on the basis of some allegation of that there might be a linkage to terrorism, and this is really turning the United States into a pseudo police state, unfortunately.
John Parker, your thoughts on that, especially given the fact that you have this huge Occupy protest movement that is going on in the United States?
That's correct. Just wanted to say this is really nothing new. Nothing new at all since the dawn of imperialism in the late 1800s, around 1890, when they started with the killing about over 3 million Filipinos during that illegal war against the Filipino population, the napalm used in Vietnam, the destruction of the infrastructure in Iraq, targeting civilians with the use of depleted uranium, white phosphorus in Fallujah, these dime weapons that they just developed, I guess, after 2006, the dense inert metal explosives, which are like tiny particles, dust particles that penetrate your organs. These are horrible weapons that they're using. They give to Israel to use in Gaza, and it's going on as we speak today. The killing of tens of thousands in Libya by the latest U.S. war. So these are crimes that are constantly being committed, and also a lot of, like the other speaker was saying, a lot of folks don't see this, but it's not because it's just happening now. Even without the Wikipedia leaks and things, this has been an ongoing, and it really shows the complicity of the corporate media in the United States, where they hide these things. Internationally, they're speaking about the hundreds of thousands of documents from Wikipedia. They're speaking about the war crimes of the past, but the U.S. media doesn't mention it because they hide it, just like they're trying to hide the Occupy movement today. Trying to keep it from being visible, especially during an election year. But this shows that we here in the United States have to do as much as we can to show support for Bradley Manning. And we congratulate the international community for showing that support, and also do what we can do to stop this and expose more and more of these things, which is nothing new. And as the United States economy and the global economy gets worse, we're going to see more and more of this, and we're going to have to step up and expose more and more and support those folks who are being heroic.
Mark Dankof, Michael Maloof talked about the U.S. Inching towards a police state. Some say it is already a police state. Do you agree? Give us some examples, and where do you see this going?
I think it's absolutely a police state, and this National Defense Authorization Act is but the latest thing.
And
you also have a situation, of course, you go back to the Patriot Acts.
Go ahead.
The Military Commissions Act of 2006. We have had the national security agency's illegal warrantless wiretap program exposed in recent years. So what you have is a circumstance where the same government that is acting unlawfully abroad and that continues to facilitate chief executives of the United States putting American troops into situations that have not involved congressional declarations of war and a clear case for the rationale of the war being made to the American people. This is the same government that is engaging in all kinds of things at home that are destroying civil liberties for people both left, center, and right, and that is progressively destroying the American economy for purposes related to the global elite, the global banking elite, that I certainly have argued has more power than anyone else in payrolling the American news media and the American government. And unfortunately, the United States military, it pains me to say this because I come from an Air Force family historically, but the United States military has become a surrogate force for evil in the world. And I'm afraid that this evil is about to consummate in a Benjamin Netanyahu, Avigdor Lieberman attack on Iran, which is totally unjustified and which both the Democratic and Republican parties, unfortunately, are about to put their imprimatur upon.
Michael Maloof, are we to conclude then that the U.S. has taken the path that it has in terms of exercising itself domestically, but even internationally, more so based on the, 650 military bases that they have, that here we are here militarily, you have to be afraid of us or else? Is that the type of approach and how the U.S. wants to be perceived?
Well, unfortunately, the United States, for the past decade, has had nothing but a history and has set an example of warfare. And that's all people have come to know us to be, are warmongers and fighters. Any place we go into, there's not a war today that's going on that we haven't liked. We just wrapped up a very tragic period in Iraq. We're still in Afghanistan. We couldn't resist Libya, and now we're talking about trying to get forces together to go into Syria. This is all that people this is why our influence as a government has really evaporated in terms of trying to demonstrate and give an example of democracy to the world. As Putin has said, if this is your example of democracy, we don't want it. And unfortunately, this is all that people now associate. We have a whole generation that's come up that's what they associate the United States with is armed conflict as an answer to any international problem. And we don't differentiate oftentimes between what is truly evil as opposed to what is a movement and the desires of people to bring about change. And it's oftentimes is then equated with acts of terrorism. We see this with the Hezbollah. We see this with Hamas. They're out there to protect their own people. They are resistance fighters. Yet the United States lumps them all in one little basket and calls them all terrorists. Therefore, they're all the enemy. Plus, the United States policy itself is in total lockstep with Israel today. And we can, even if we wanted to break free of that, we cannot because of the extraordinary lobby that exists in Congress that can cut off the funds of any administration that chooses to do otherwise.
Thank you very much.
The United States policy approach is really in jeopardy.
Thank you very much. Former Pentagon official Michael Maloof, we appreciate that. That's the end for this edition of the News Analysis. Also like to thank former U.S. Senate candidate Mark Dankof from Texas and West Coast coordinator, International Action Center, John Parker from Los Angeles. Thank you, the viewer, for watching another edition of the Press TV News Analysis. Any questions or comments, suggestions, newsroom at presstv.ir. From me, Kaveh Tafway, and the entire team, it's goodbye.